Hey, my fruit growing friends, we always seem to have questions popping up in the groups about what to do with root suckers when they come up. And primarily in our local fig growers group, but just so it's not confusing, about 99% of the fruit trees that we have are grafted. So it's a good variety grafted onto usually an inedible or indesirable rootstock variety. And the rootstock or any root suckers are not of value. And usually what my practice is, you can see here a few days ago where I had some suckers coming up along here. There's one coming out right there since, and I just used my thumb to knock those off or rub them off as they pop up. Also, it has something to do with structure. This particular tree, I don't want it branching out down here, so I'll just take those while they're young and knock them right off. Citrus, well, any fruit tree, kind of the same. You probably see some pile up down there where I just knock those suckers off. There's some exceptions to it. Pomegranate is rarely grafted, and depending on how you want to grow it, usually it's a clump with several bases on it. If you want to grow it in a single stalk, like they do for harvesting purposes in some of the orchards, it's okay just to keep one and take those suckers away. But pomegranate, mulberry being another one that can produce good fruit coming up from those root suckers if you want it to grow that while. And then of course figs. And here's my take on the fig deal. Generally in pots, I want all the energy going to one place. So if I see a root sucker coming up like right here, I'll catch it pretty early. And that's not necessarily a root sucker, that's just another branch growing at the base. I'll knock those off pretty early and just try to maintain this central stem. So you can see I don't have any on my pots here because I want to focus that energy right here on the single stem. Now here is a sucker coming up, and this thing will develop roots down here eventually if I leave it, and then of course you can dig that out in fall and have you another plant. But for my purposes, just my personal preference on it, I knock those off as soon as I see them. The exception might be if I want to clone that plant. And here's one down here that this sucker is coming up way out, 3 or 4 inches away from the base, and this thing has probably already got some roots on it. So on this particular one, I'm going to leave this and dig that up, and it'll already be well rooted in the fall, and then I can share that variety with somebody or use it as rootstock or whatever you want to do. Now the other exception would be the style that you want it to grow in. And if you want it to grow more in a bushy fashion like I'm letting this particular plant do, then let those root suckers come up, and you can change your mind about that somewhere along the way if you want to and bring it back down to a single stem. But there, I'll let some of these root suckers grow up because I want this to get a little bit bigger. This, I've got every kind of style of tree in the world around here. This one has 2, which I don't believe is always the best practice, but I'm just like everybody else. When I've got a healthy tree that's got 2 limbs on it, sometimes I have a hard time cutting them off. But that one's growing 2, this one growing in a single stalk or a central leader on it. And then when that central leader comes out, you can prune that to form a couple of branches there, prune that again, and it forms its fruiting branches coming off. This particular case, I've got a central leader. It's not split anywhere, but I've got what I refer to as a spiral staircase of limbs growing around. So the limbs are growing around and around and around in a spiral staircase fashion so that sun can get in from several different points. But here's one that I wanted to show you that is just an idea you can use if you want to, because a lot of people talk about doing espaliers with figs, and they're pretty easy to do it with. But here is 3 root suckers that have come up around this particular tree, and what I've done is just taken where those 2 come up right there. While they were young, I bent them over, and in this case I just used a landscape pen kind of stuff you use typically to hold down or to keep irrigation in place, but it's just a landscape pin, a big staple, if you will. And on the tip of it, I just put that in, and I've directed that for the last month or so to grow this way. The other one, I did the same thing. It's got a landscape pin on it right there, and as the plant grows, I'll just move that landscape pin out to keep it growing lower. And these will go this way and this way. And this particular one, I didn't catch it early enough, but I've got a pot ready that I have cut in half, and I'll put that pot around that particular sucker, scrape it up a little bit, and I'll put one of the sprinkler heads to it, and that will root. And this is a pretty desirable tree. It's a little striped fig, and people like it, so I'm going to make an extra tree here that I'll have a real nice rooted tree in fall or early spring next year. But with this method, with the espalier, here is what will happen over a period of time, because I did this last year to this particular tree, single stem, and I did the same thing with a couple of suckers that come out of it. I laid this one going this way, just like I showed you over there. This one I laid going this way. And last year, I can't remember if I pruned it back. It looks like that I did. I pruned it back to right here. So this is all of this year's current growth. And let me back off of that. You can see, starts right there. It's grown down to right here. That landscape pin won't be enough after a little while, so I've just taken a brick and put a string around it, and I keep this weighed down so it's at this level. And then occasionally I just come out here and move that string to the very tip end of it. And what happens is next year, you can see on last year's growth that next year this will put up branches that will be your fruiting branches. And you can leave those in a single stem, or you could prune that back and have it form its own little tree. Here's the other one. This is last year's growth. Here's where this year's growth starts at. It's put on this limb, and you can see it's putting on. And you know, you can cut this back to another desirable height in fall, or cut it all the way right back to this espalier stem. And this particular one, I dropped it off of the wall here, and I'm going to bring that down and let it grow all the way through here. Interesting concept, and some people are just interested in espaliering, and they make it difficult. And here's just a method that actually makes it pretty easy, and you can put your imagination to work as to what this will look like in a year or so. Hope that helps. Happy figging.